Disney's new Star Wars show Ahsoka is set to come out later this week, and there are people out there who I would say are a little less than enthusiastic about the prospects of how this show will actually do. Right now, I got this article pulled up from The Independent. It's titled, "Can Disney's new TV show Ahsoka stop Star Wars becoming an utter Sith show?" So the article basically starts off by just kind of going into a little background about Disney purchasing Star Wars and the stuff that they've produced since then, like how um, The Force Awakens and Rogue One did fairly well, but after The Last Jedi, then things kind of fallen off. I mean, then Solo came out and that bombed, and then The Rise of Skywalker might have made money, but it was also kind of messy and a bit, I don't know, wonky about like the ratings and stuff for it. But right now, this kind of goes down into it to say like what it thinks the problem is. So the Star Wars series have not been all bad. The first season of Andor was strong, downright brilliant in stretches, while The Mandalorian and Visions have been broadly well liked. But it's clear at this point that the franchise is in trouble. The Disney Plus shows have all failed to make an impact with mainstream audiences, save for a brief meme phenomenon that was Baby Yoda. The Book of Boba Fett was swallowed up without a trace, Sarlacc style. Obi-Wan Kenobi was a similar non-event despite the vaunted returns of prequel trilogy stars Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen. Ahsoka, which sees Rosario Dawson play Ronin-like Jedi Ahsoka Tano, seems destined for the same fate. The continuation of the story that began in the animated Star Wars Rebels, Ahsoka is likely to have a limited appeal beyond the already converted. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of also saying like a lot of the issues that it thinks it has is ultimately with just the Disney Plus shows. And this article gives its reasons about why it thinks Disney should move away from the shows and start steering more towards movies. And I think there's a good explanation for that, but I don't necessarily entirely agree with what it's concluding with this, because it does say something like Obi-Wan, how it was just kind of like a non-event, but if it was just basically condensed down into an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, then it might have been more well received, or it might have made a lot more money for the company. It says it'll probably would have made hundreds of millions if they did that, and that's actually probably true. But when you just dump it onto a Disney Plus platform, it says it ultimately concludes that the streaming model is not a sustainable one for these companies and these studios, because it's not able to make enough in user revenue than it is actually going to spend on these things. I mean, I know Disney's trying to offset that with advertisers and as well as subscriber money, but it's probably not going to be as much as what they're actually spending on these things. And I agree with that part of it, but the solution is, I say, is less about not putting content on there. And I think more of it has to do with the fact that they need to be more restrictive and more economical with what they're actually putting on there. Because right now, what we're ultimately seeing is, just think about Disney Plus as the Disney Channel, or so for people who are old enough to remember the Disney Channel, they would put out shows and things like that on there, even ones that are based off of their movies that were fine, but they weren't necessarily had the same budget of it. I mean, I remember when I was a kid watching a lot of shows that were based off of the movies and things like that. And that's, I mean, it just wasn't given the budget of the movies, but I mean, it was just treated how it was. It was a TV show. And the problem is, like, with a lot of TV nowadays, they're trying to treat it as if it's movies. And I think I do like that a lot, where they're really elevating what you can do with TV. And I think there is a time and a place for that. But every show that they make isn't going to be like a massive hit like that. And I think they need to understand that, even though it has a Star Wars name, because the Star Wars name is just a brand, so to speak. You have certain things, like if you imagine a Venn diagram, you have a lot of circles like that have like the overlap, and in the middle is basically going to be the original trilogy, and probably to a lesser extent the prequel trilogy, where it just had appeal to everyone. But with a lot of these shows, I mean, it even says like shows like with things like Andor, it was pretty well received if you look at the Rotten Tomatoes score. And I mean, even Obi-Wan, for the most part, well, to a lesser extent, but I mean, it was still positive on here. It's has some appeal amongst the audience who actually watch it, but it's not being as viewed as widely as what other shows have done, or just in the Star Wars universe. So what they're trying to do is, like, they have that Venn diagram, and they're just kind of appealing more to one side of it than the other, which means you're going to have some drop off with there. And as a result, they're not going to get the type of viewers that they want, or even the audience size that they want for what they're spending on this. So honestly, what they should be doing is treating these shows like TV shows and spending less money on them. Now, the article from The Independent ultimately says that they should be doing more movies. And while there is a huge list of movies coming out, I mean, I think there's maybe not a huge list. I think there's like 4 movies in production according to this. But this article right here just kind of talks about the different things that they have in development right now. I'm not going to stop for everything, but you can just kind of see what they're actually doing with this. I mean, much of this is Disney Plus shows, but they do have, I think, 4 movies that they've announced at least. I mean, whether they're going to move forward with that, it remains to be seen. But they've announced movies that moving forward. And this thing was saying, this article was ultimately saying that they should be focusing on that because the streaming model is a dead model. And I think what the streaming model should be thought of is not their primary Star Wars vessel. It should be just kind of like something where you have your primary bread and butter is the movies, and then you make a lower budget shows that you can put onto your streaming platform. And while they might not appeal to everyone, I think they'll have a lot more of appeal to certain niche audiences, because that's ultimately what Star Wars used to do. Like with Rebels and Clone Wars, those didn't have appeal to the whole general Star Wars audiences. It was just a niche audience, and I think those people are going to show up to see Ahsoka. But the thing is, that's still a smaller demographic than people who showed up, who actually showed up for Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan had more broad appeal to general Star Wars fans. So I think we're going to see something like that with Ahsoka, but I think for the most part, it's going to be well received by people who like her and like the character and stuff like that, or who are just a general Star Wars fan who will watch anything, because those people do exist. But I don't think it's what Disney is really hoping for with this one. And I think really that's why Disney is trying to think like, we need to start reducing the amount of content that we're putting out on these platforms and stuff like that. Or they're kind of focusing more on Marvel and Star Wars, because those are the ones that those are basically the IPs that they're putting out a lot of stuff for, and they're kind of like cutting back on that. And that's not really the goal, or that's really not what they should be doing, or what they should be thinking about. What they should be thinking about is, how do we focus on just individual things? I mean, if you can put out 10 things and put out 10 quality things, that's great. But if you have a tough time maintaining quality when you're putting out so much, then yeah, reduce the amount of content that you're putting out, and make sure like you can't bite off more than what you can chew with when it comes to Marvel and Star Wars and things like that. And maybe that will help turn the ship around. But right now, I don't see that happening in the near future. I mean, I think it'll take some changes at the upper management levels at these studios in order to fix what they've been more or less have broken from all this. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you agree, disagree? Do you think they should focus more on the streaming or less? I mean, are movies done and streaming's the future? And just let me know. And if you like this video, make sure you click that like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest news. Thank you.